I love Bolt of Gransax. I just love Bolt of Gransax so much. What's not to love about it? You can snipe enemies away with it. They get knocked off, you can poke them from behind a shield, you can use barricade, shield, and turtle cheese the entirety of the game. This is one of the most broken and well-rounded weapons in the entirety of the game, because it just covers every single little front that a weapon can possibly cover. Now there are so many playstyles that you can adapt with it. Let's deep dive in them. The Ash of War has some of the farthest ranges of any Ashes of War, and the Ash of War in the entirety of the game. It doesn't deal that much poise damage, so that is a bummer. But then again, Bolt of Gransax is not about critical hits. You're not going to be dealing critical hits with this weapon, it's just about distance, and the defensiveness that the playstyle is also going to give you. It will, however, knock down enemies that are struck by it, and it's tremendously helpful because it can stun lock quite a lot of high HP enemies. That said, it allows you to always keep them at bay, but also, whenever that happens, that you have a very aggressive enemy, that it is not going to allow you to do such a thing, it can also be paired up with, like I said, Barricade Shield, Ash of War, which was buffed again in patch 107 after the nerf they did at launch, because yes, it's a very overpowered Ash of War. Just being behind a shield, it's something very powerful, and as a matter of fact, From Software has never intended for that playstyle to be that predominant, but that is something that can also be done as well, and that pretty much covers defense, offense, range, DPS. There's nothing, like I said, there's nothing that this weapon it's not going to do for you. Probably one of the, if not the most round weapon in the entirety of the game, and it's just such an excellent option to carry into Shadow of the Earth3. It's also going to have plus 20% more damage against dragons and plus 10% damage against ancient dragons, so that's actually a nice little something right there. So now let's talk about the stats, because the stats are pretty simple. The biggest and most important thing is going to be reaching the hard cap for Dexterity at 80. The weapon Ash of War damage scales off of Dexterity, but also it scales based on AR, the weapon attack range. Now we have 30 mind because the build is highly dependent on FP, both for defense and for offense, since like I said, we're going to be using the shield barricade Ash of War whenever that our enemies are in front of us. It's not going to cost that much FP, but it's still going to be always being used right there. Now, since you want to use the Ash of War as much as you can, you want to have the 30 right there. Like I said, for the barricade shield as well. Then we have to meet the weapon requirements. 20 strength. Although that's also going to do something a little bit different for us as well. We want to have enough vigor to take punishments and enough endurance that would allow us to use a medium armor set that guarantees the 51 basic poise we need to withstand the enemy attacks. The most important thing when it comes to armor is to reach 51 poise. That is the threshold to not get staggered by most regular attacks. Also, the animation has some kind of hyper armor as well, so it helps quite a bit as well. It doesn't have that much, but it does. Now, the complete knight armor set gives precisely that 51 poise, which is a viable choice. However, it doesn't necessarily have to be that one. I'd just like to point that one because it's one of the lightest ones that is going to give you that 51 poise that you need. But then again, it doesn't necessarily have to be that one. That's why we have invested some points into endurance, so that you can reach it, that 51 threshold, with whichever combo on armor that you would like to use. That also applies to some extent for the shield, and like I mentioned, we did have that 20 strength, which is very helpful, because the brass shields and the banished knight shields are some of the best medium type shields that are going to have quite a lot of guard boost. They don't actually weigh that much, so you can pair them up with whichever armor set that you are going to be using with this build, but they also have a strength requirement that we actually do have because of the weapon strength requirement, so we have that covered in there as well. Both of them have the highest guard for medium shields in the game, but if possible, the best poke scenario would be a great shield if you can. If you would like to invest a little bit more points into endurance, this is 150 builds. But if you do want to go that extra mile, endurance is a place where you can be allocating a little bit more points around here and there. Now, as an extra something, we are also going to be using a dagger. The dagger is going to be embedded with Golden Bow, because we don't have faith, we don't have actual ways of buffing a character. So dagger with Golden Bow, it's just regular knowledge. It's free 11.5% damage and also 7.5% damage negation. It is of course not as good as the spell on itself, Golden Bow, but it is very useful, of course. I have been playing around with the Talismans as well to see which one of them all is the most viable option, and this that we have right here, it's the best. Shout of Alexander, 15% more skill damage. That's very helpful because then again our skill deals quite a bit of damage. Then we have Godfrey Icon. It raises the skill's charge attacks as well for spells. This actually does affect the weapon Ash of War that we have right here. Then we have Lightning Scorpion Charm, 12% more damage. It is not going to be that much because the lightning damage in here is not that much in our weapon, so it's something that you are going to have as a base damage. But then again, the skill, it's actually just pure lightning damage, so that is going to actually be highly increased as well. Just to have in mind that this is also going to give you some damage negation, so you'll take a little bit more damage. Then we have finally the Spear Talisman. It gives you 15% more thrusting counterattack with your thrusting weapons. This requires each time a little bit clarification because a lot of people asks about this talismans. There's also a bit of confusion because of the counterattack kind of mechanic. It doesn't work like that. It's not like the mechanic where you block and then you hit the heavy attack to trigger a counter attack. It is not going to increase that. The thrusting counter attacks is when you are dealing damage to someone at that time they are doing an attack. That trade-off, that is the damage that it is going to be increased, and since you're always going to be poking from behind your shield, that's always going to be active because you're always going to be trading blows with the enemies. So the Flasks of Wondrous Physics. We have Lightning Shrouding Crackthea that is going to boost your lightning attacks. Then again, this is going to highly increase the damage of our skill, which is something that we very much want. Now, I was actually hoping that the Spike Crackthea was going to increase the damage as well, but unfortunately it doesn't. And since you don't have like anything else to pair this thing up with, you can by all means use the Dexterity, not Crystal Tea, but remember that we have already reached the hard cap of our build right here. So getting those extra Dexterity in there, in reality, it's not going to be that much damage either. So either the Green Burst, Crystal Tier, anything else really, like for example as well the Crimson Burst, Crystal Tier to steadily give you HP regen. There's a whole bunch of things that you have right here. It doesn't necessarily have to be anything. The one that you are going to have to take as a must is going to be the Lightning Shroud Crackthea. Now overall, if we actually round up everything, we are sitting at 15% more damage with the Shadow of Alexander. Godfrey Icon, 15% more damage as well. The Lightning Scorpion Charm, it's going to give us 12% more damage. And then we have the Lightning Crystal Tia that is going to give us 20% more extra damage. And finally, Golden Bow, 11.5% more damage. That is going to round up as a roughly 60% more damage increase when it comes to our weapon on itself, just the weapon skill on itself. But we also have that little extra 12%, 15% more damage, more DPS at all times with the basic attacks, so we are still buffing like every single little thing about the weapon. And remember that the Lightning Scorpion Charm, it's not only going to be affecting the skill on itself, it's going to give us native DPS, extra DPS, not that much, but it's something, I guess. it's just something a little extra. So yeah, it's just a very, very well-rounded weapon. It has everything. Like I said, the range on this thing for the Ash of War, it just can snipe and melt everything from a huge range. So I can't stress enough how important that is. If you want to be fighting from a distance, if you are a really defensive player, This just has everything for you, because at the same time you also have the barricade shield, so that you can be poking from behind the shield, and you don't really have to care about a very aggressive enemies, the ones that are actually going to be able to bypass that Ash of War to get in your face, because you still have defensive options that actually deal tremendous amount of damage as well, because the weapon in itself, it deals just nice damage. Have that in mind, that it's also a light spear. It's not a heavy one. It's not, for example, like Bike spear or something like that, or Mogwin spear. This is a light spear, so that's something to consider as well. Anyways, if you like the content, like never super appreciate it. And also, you that you're a gorgeous and beautiful person. You're indeed a gorgeous and beautiful person. Have a lovely day. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, join the Discord. Have a lovely day and goodbye.